Hello guys, it's a pleasure to see you here, to be here in front of you. Today we want to share our experience of implementing PWA, Progressive Web Application, for quite an old platform which we are working with. So first of all, we'll start with some introduction. I'm Ilja, CTO at Scandiweb.
And I'm Alfred, the front-end lead at Scandiweb. So,
Scandiweb is a company who is more than 10 years on the market, and the main focus always was on Magento platform, Magento 1 and Magento 2 as well. So that was obvious choice for us what to choose as a basic platform and what to improve to gain a modern experience, a modern front-end. A short review of Magento in case you have never touched it. So Magento is a purely PHP platform. It's using mostly server-side rendering on PHP. It has own layout system that's different from Blade or Twig if you're familiar with them. And it's packed with quite outdated tools like jQuery, Knockout, Less, Grunt, etc., which we're not actually excited about. So today's story is about how to change this to a better solution. Who knows what is PWA or Progressive Web Application?
anyone? Yes, you. Yeah.
Should I explain it or?
Just how you understand it?
It's like a web application on your phone. It's not a native app. The phone sees it like a native app, but it's not. It's like website.
That's true. That's true. Anybody else has other understanding? Okay. Yeah. So that's true, but the idea is it is a web page, but it provides an application-like feeling. So you are not actually feeling a website. You don't have even a browser around it, all these elements of the browser, but you are getting the application feeling, which is written on HTML, CSS, JavaScript. So I think you know it well, all these technologies. Sounds simple, and there are some technical solutions which were released recently, which allow actually us to do so. The main concern, the main problem before this solution that made us impossible actually to build such things were big limitation of the storage on the client. We had actually no possibility to store big amounts of data on the client within a browser. And it's now solved with Cache API, IndexedDB API, and others, of course, like local storage and etc. But we will discuss it a bit later. And there is one more important improvement, which is Serviceworker. The Serviceworker is a programmable network proxy within the browser. So each request the browser is issuing to the server is passed through the Serviceworker. Serviceworker has no direct access to the DOM on the page, but it has all accesses to the mentioned APIs. So actually Cache API is mentioned to cache request response only, and IndexedDB is just a key store value actually. About the limitations of these storages, there are limitations, and these are different from platform to platform, from browser to browser. But the smallest limitation is 50 megabytes. And in some circumstances, like Google, like Chrome on your PC, it will ask for additional permission once you reach 100 megabytes, I believe. Next. Here is an example of Serviceworker. It's taken from our prototype. The code is not very beautiful, but I think it's quite readable. So here is an example of the very first event of the Serviceworker from the lifecycle, which is ignoring previous version, which is actually sending to himself specific requests to port the headers, since we had no functionality implemented to do it from application. On the application level, we had this functionality within the Serviceworker. We did such a hotfix, which is quite obvious. So it's cache purge header with cache name. There are two important things when you start with the Serviceworker. The first thing is Serviceworker lifecycle. So each Serviceworker starts with install. What happened there? The browser is just checking if the Serviceworker can be executed. If it can, then Serviceworker is queued for activation. If you had a previous version and you are not doing skip waiting, as in previous example, your new Serviceworker will start working only after you close all tabs with your application. It's done for back compatibility with previous versions in case your new Serviceworker introduce some major changes and something may happen if you accidentally just swap your Serviceworker. The next event is activate, which occurs immediately before your new Serviceworker is activated, so it starts to get all those requests and process them. And the next event is fetch, which happens constantly, which is actually passing the request object in the payload. The next thing which is important, starting with Serviceworker, was scoping. So in this example, we are loading, it's an example of how to load your Serviceworker on the page. In this example, we are loading Serviceworker from the root of our domain. So so this Serviceworker will catch all requests, no matter what it is, and where it is. Where it is stored, so it's image, ID of the page, or some assets. And in this example, we are hosting it from JS folder, which is suitable for JS content. However, in this example, we will be able to process only files hosted within JS folder, within JS path on our server, as all other files, all other paths, including pages and other prefixes, except JS, will be out of the Serviceworker scope. So that's important when you start, to put it in a separate folder, and then you will wonder why it's not working for me, why I cannot see any request in my fetch.
So, guys, you saw code examples, and most probably you thought it's a little bit complex to write on your own. And honestly it is. And as a solution, Google has released its toolbox called Workbox, which consists of amazing tools like pre-cache, route-based behaviors, and the most interesting is the cache strategies. So it allows you to implement different cache behaviors on different routes. For example, not for example, but before we speak about examples, Workbox has disadvantages. And the most important for us is the lack of post caching, so you cannot really cache post. And yeah, you can do this, and well, you are lacking the functional of IndexedDB, so you are working with Cache API only. Cache API, just for your information, is the cache storage which can store the requests and only methods, responses, sorry, and the only method it supports is the get method. And the IndexedDB is just an object storage, and you can store anything there, so even the response. So, I think we skipped slide. And one of the great behaviors which come with the Workbox is the stale while revalidate behavior, which means that the information, when you request data, the Serviceworker will first check if it has cached data in it. And if it has, then it will return your cache immediately, and then it will go on server and request this data to invalidate cache and update the cache value. But you have to communicate back to the client, to the client actually, yes. Yeah, you have to communicate back to the application. And how you are doing this is via the broadcast update API. So another API you have to learn in order to use your service workers efficiently is the broadcast API, broadcast update API. Well, just like I mentioned, Cache API and IndexedDB. Sorry. Speaking about offline experience. Offline experience is, we get offline experience because we are able to take cached data from our storages. And for server-side rendered applications, you have to store whole pages in your cache. For client-side, you don't. And this is essentially why we had to make a switch. As you remember, in the beginning, my colleague said that Magento is PHP-based platform, which means it uses server-side rendering to display the content. So for going PWA, for a greater performance and using less storage on your user device, you have to go to client-side rendering. Of course, SSR is important for SEO because crawlers like it. So it has to be left, but the service worker should, after registration, respond with the client-side rendered assets. So your application, after installation, have to start working immediately. Now, SPA. What you got? Anyone knows what is this? SPA is a single-page applications, which means they are using the browser history push API, which allows to navigate between pages without reload. And one of the examples are any React DOM router applications, which are based on React router, or Vue router. Any reactive platform currently support this browser history push API, and this allows for loading and switching between pages without reload. We can go through. So, awesome. We had a decision. We are going SPVA, we are going SPA, and we are doing client-side rendering. This hurts machines because it takes more resources to render. But at the same time, we had to decide which of the existing libraries will hurt machines the less. And by our experience, the React is the way which is the most optimized for devices. Also, React sells well, so our choice of React was based on business decisions of our management, essentially. Yes. So now we are going into interesting part, which I like the most. And this is the internal structure of application. Because we are doing this for developers and for clients and then for developers, and developers are still very important for us, we want to keep a great development speed. And what is important when you're coming to the project is the navigation, internal navigation. And what we did is we used and defined naming conventions, which is very important on your projects. And we use postfix naming convention, which means the file name defines the place or the logic. For example, as you may see, notification means it's everything related to notification. But the postfix, for example, reducer, dispatcher, action, component, container, those are all different implementations of parts. So the naming conventions are important, and they allow for quicker navigation and easier access to the information. I really recommend, when you are starting from the beginning, think about naming conventions, because if you don't, your file structure may become a little bit messy. Another stuff, what we did is separating frontend on two parts, which I like to call frontend of frontend and the backend of frontend. Strangely, but the frontend of frontend is essentially the data rendering. So you are displaying or visualizing the data which the backend part is giving to you. And in our case, those are components and route folders, the component folders of React and the pages which we are loading components in. And the backend of frontend is all data gathering parts, which request, which fetch, which do stuff and get data. They also are responsible for data formatting and data preparation for the frontend part to display. And this allowed us to make a very good delegation of responsibilities between developers, because developers are great in stuff they are doing, in specific stuff they are doing. Very rare developer is great in everything. So we can delegate responsibilities more efficiently, and this helps a lot. Who's familiar with React? I believe somebody here. Who? You are? No, you are. Anyone? So, as you may know, on large scale applications, when you have a lot of data going in and out, you have to think about global state management systems. What it essentially is a tool which allows you to manage global data. That data globally. This could be configs, this could be currently loaded products, anything. And as the solution for this, there are different libraries like Mobix, like Redux, and from the beginning we took Mobix as a solution. But it wasn't that great, because it used JavaScript proxy underneath, and proxies in JavaScript are not that predictable. You cannot predict what they will return. And we wanted some better declaration, because other developers will work on it. And if there is no prediction, if you cannot expect something to be there, it's not reliable. So we wanted something more reliable, and Redux was a solution for us. It's more declarative approach. Next on the line is style organization. You know, everyone does class names. Everyone knows how to write, everyone has their preference. Someone does error, someone does dash, someone does underscores. People tend to mix everything up, and in the end, after the project is complete, after the support is started to work on it, the project becomes a mess. You get your nestings of 6, of 7, everywhere. You are unable to find the declaration of files because it's complex to do. And what we have as the solution for this mess is the BAM system. The BAM, which is style organization pattern, essentially, which divides any element in HTML, any styled element, to block element and modifier parts. So you could specify whether it's a block, whether it's an element of a block, and whether it has some modifiers or not. And in the SAS or any SAS implementation, SAS or CSS, you may style your elements like this, and you may nest the names, which renders into the zero nesting. So in the end, files have zero nesting, and your bundles are more efficient, CSS bundles, but okay, your CSS bundles are more efficient and way less, because there is no nesting, and you can, there is no nesting. Another thing which helps more, sorry, we just covered that. Another thing that brings a lot of bundle optimization is the CSS custom properties, because it's always a pain to rewrite some default styles. For example, buttons. You have to have a button style because styling buttons by classes is like not so good. So you have to have your custom styling. And why it saves a bundle space is because you can, because the custom CSS variables are scoped, and if you add this value to the parent of a button, the button will inherit this property and will apply to itself. So if this one is the button declaration, this on the parent could change the button, and this works without nesting. So once again, escaping nesting, which decreases the size of a bundle, which increases the speed of development, first of all, and the speed of rendering. Everything is better with CSS custom variables, especially animations. Because animations in JavaScript are great, but not as great as CSS animations, because CSS is more powerful and done before JavaScript is applied. And this means that with CSS custom variables, you can control just the variables and pass them into your animations like this. So we're using custom variable, which is defaulted to 0, but we can anytime pass the correct value for it, which will be synced with all the events of your JavaScript. And this will work, and this will work amazingly well. And I really recommend you trying custom variables in production, because it brings a lot of great experience, both in development and both in terms of development speed and quality, and the final product speed and efficiency. Next important topic you have to think before you integrate is the accessibility and focus stuff, which essentially means knowing HTML5 semantics brings you a lot of things to consider before implementation. This means you have to think how you will structure your files. This means how you will how you will control the focus and stuff like this. So imagine you have to have all interactive elements be in correct tab order. Maybe someone is doing this already. Maybe if you do, it's awesome, because I really appreciate people thinking about accessibility, because I know many people who are partially blind, and this means that they have to use these accessibility tools. And we are thinking about them, and this makes, and using accessibility features and tools which provided brings first of all a better setup, because Google evaluates this, and also it brings the accessibility itself. So there will be more customers able to work with your product. And this is always important for our merchants, and we are supporting this, and we are loving to do this, because it's an awesome feature, and I really recommend everyone thinking about, or at least considering. And finally, the part which we worked a little bit on, because is the going from HTML to React components. So we want something to be interactive. For example, links, which have a different behavior, whether it's a simple a declaration or the link component from React Router DOM. It has a different action on click. If you click on the simple link, it will open and refresh the page. If you click on the component link, it will simply push the new state into browser history and load the correct content. So no page reload will occur. And for a better user experience, we have to consider this as Magento has a CMS embedded, and clients may edit the content themselves. So we had to think for them and make their content editing experience as seamless as it was before, but render stuff better. And here is how it looks. Not as beautiful, but still it's a possibility to do, and it's possible to do in React. So we are doing this. For example, as you may see, we have some element name A, which has a function attached which replaces links, and we are going through and replacing them with the link component itself, which is great and neat. If you will be sometimes going with React, think about this example. Once again, this is the HTML React parser library in combination with the custom parser rules. Now, going to a very important topic called data, which makes our application work. Ilja, welcome on stage.
So, since we have to divide our front end into two parts, which is application itself, so managing the states, the look, the functionality, and then another part is data that will enable us actually to build an application like Philly. With data, which is stored on the server, which often, almost always, was used as a REST API, and a REST API was used for getting the data and updating the data on the backend of your databases. It was fine, except the fact that REST API is always a final definition of the data set. However, another, not new technology, but something new we are doing right now is GraphQL. GraphQL is a query language released almost 6 years ago by Facebook, which uses schemas for declaration and validation. However, the big advantage of GraphQL is allowing you as a front-end developers to define your own set of data for different cases. So you can get all available fields for the data. For example, here name and appears in, or you can just ask for the name field, and it won't bring it won't break anything. At the same time, you can extend the schema, add more fields to the schema, and make it possible to fetch these fields, but at the same time you will not break compatibility for your older queries. But that was not so simple as we thought, obviously. GraphQL community is mostly concentrated around Node.js environment. However, luckily, there was a library which ported GraphQL to PHP, and it was even implemented as a part of Magento, the latest version, but we spotted that there are more limitations, which partially are platform limitations, just because of partial implementation or integration with the library, and as well as poor performance pure performance, which left us with up to 10 seconds load time, which was unacceptable. Of course, it was fine with the service worker when we were rendering the old data and then updating them. Slowly, it was fine, but once you reach the page for the first time, it was awesome. It was awful. Sorry. It was really bad experience. The reasons there were many reasons, like EAV model. So there are many queries to the databases to resolve these GraphQL requests, and the only thread in PHP that cannot be even executed asynchronously, at least for Magento, it's not possible. So we had to reinvent the cache. If you will recall or take another look on the presentation, where we were mentioning that we were lacking post caching, we know that caching post is not good. It's not good, but for that time it was a prototype, it was the way we were requesting the data, and we had no chance, so we actually learned a service worker. But now we learned much more from the GraphQL community, and we found out that actually these posts to GraphQL, because each GraphQL request is might be a big query, up to a few kilobytes, can be converted to GET request. And this solution is called persistent queries. So persistent queries actually mean that we have a schema which describes the fields and the structure of our request. It also allows us to pass some values, for example, ID or name for product category, whatever you need, to get a specific entity. At the same time, it's flexible because we can create this GraphQL request on the front end without worrying that something will be broken. And we don't want to use this possibility. So for this scenario, there is a dynamic persistent query. What does it mean? We calculate a hash for the query. We build a query. We have a slide for this, I believe.
We build a query.
Yes, it's next topic. We build a query. We calculate a hash. And we are sending a simple GET with that hash. What happens next? If server knows which query is mapped to the hash, it just executes that query. So we are saving a lot of bandwidth, and this request can be cached with just a simple varnish, for example, or CDN, which is a beautiful solution. What happens if we don't have such query? We don't have such query with such hash. Then we execute a put request with entire query and the same hash. This query is saved on the server, and we execute the GET again with just a hash, and it's cached. We'll see an example in a while.
We can show it first and then go to building queries.
Let's show it.
Maybe I can make the speed faster a little bit.
Yes, you can, definitely. Two.
This is how we showcase the clients the speed of our websites.
Yeah, so I'm flushing the caches. we're reloading the page, we're optimistically sending get. It is failing. We're executing the posts, the puts. We're putting the queries to the server. And we just started another GET request. Another GET request, which was resolved. Now there will be another reload to show you how it's. That's speed without even the service worker, so it's purely local server. So I found it quite awesome. Regarding the persisted queries, we were looking a solution in a bit wrong direction. We were trying to. We actually created a middleware between our engines on the server and resolvers, which were inside Magento, and it was caching well the responses from GraphQL endpoint, but we were lacking of cache update and cache flush mechanisms. So we ended with a very complex, actually task. It was never even started. With a very complex task, how to make all these caches dynamic as it's e-commerce. We cannot afford to show users the data from yesterday, right? Or to show at 7 p.m. the data from 1 p.m., right? It will lead to many confusing situations. So we finished up with moving to get and using Varnish as a cache. So to compare the numbers, without a cache it's all on the local machine. We had about 5 seconds responses. After creating the first cache version, it was resolved within 100 milliseconds, and after moving to Varnish, it was resolved under 10 milliseconds.
Great. Maybe we will skip this topic due to time lag, but it's an interesting topic, but we may skip it. Maybe.
Let's just go briefly.
Okay. Normally people build queries like this. It's a simple string. But the issue with this approach is that you can never get the parts of it. So, for example, you will use variable here somewhere as an argument for this field, and you won't be able to parse it. And because we have to modify the requests and build from the normal post of the string to the basically get with parameters, we had to make some query builder, and our query builder is not a string. It's a possibility to add a field and field lists, etc. So you can build your queries dynamically, add or remove fields, do your stuff, basically. And this allowed us essentially to get this get request. Without this query builder, it wouldn't be possible. And thankfully, we did it from the very beginning, and there are no alternatives now on the market, because GraphQL is a new technology and people tend not to think about these things. So we did it, and maybe we will share. We will definitely share it going open source. Yes. But yeah, thank you. That's briefly the idea of building queries instead of
actually it saved us a lot of pain when we started to go with GET request for this. So it took just a few days to move it, because actually queries and how we work with queries was not changed the way we work with them.
Yeah, and the results finishing up. We got our amazing, as just said, 20 performance response from server and with data, and almost instant loading. We are getting 98% in the Lighthouse audit, but unfortunately you wouldn't be able to validate because the demo, which is here, is the version 1. It's done 2 months ago, and we are unable to show you the version number 2 because
we will release it shortly.
Yeah, it will be released.
Probably 2 weeks.
And it will be released as well as the open source libraries. They will be both together because currently this is the all closed product and the new version will be released as an open source. You know why we did open source after? Because we had to optimize the code inside and clean it up. That's pretty much it. Thank you, guys. Do you have questions?
I have a question. What were the main problems of implementing progressive web app? Were there any like?
So the main problem was that entire page was rendered on the server.
Yeah.
And we had a choice to cache entire page for fast response on the client, or we had to cache nothing, right? So the main problem was to redesign the front end actually, to separate it into 2 threads. The one is application itself, and another is data. And data is still rendered, calculated, validated, etc. on the server, while the application itself, with the application-like behavior with React router, was exactly done. So that was the most time-consuming part of the PWA, but to be honest, if that's not an e-commerce, if it's not so dynamic application, it can be done without it. Or if it's some sort of single-page application, it can be done quite easily. Just adding Serviceworker, and actually you are good to go. Because the thing that probably we would not mention enough, one of the ideas are offline mode. So revisiting what you have already seen while you are disconnected. And this possibility is granted only by Serviceworker by using this cache and IndexedDB APIs and cache application.
Yes, please.
Maybe I don't understand it correctly, but I'm trying to open it offline. It doesn't open.
There is a bug with that. If you will go to the home page, and if you would turn off your network, then you will be able to reload and navigate along the website.
And the network is turned off. Boja saturu kļūdu.
We'll resolve it. Resolve this a little bit later. But for sure.
Yeah, there was actually one problem, which was caused just misconfiguration.
You can show on this screen. Let's move just on this screen, maybe everyone can see.
That was caused by. Actually, the problem is Serviceworker is registering just a home page, and just a home page is cached. Let's try this. Let's get back. Turn Wi-Fi off.
Oh, it's so beautiful. Oh, guys, very funny. Yes, so this is how it looks when you don't touch your demo website for 2 months.
Yeah.
Essentially, we had to rewrite this demo from the very beginning, and this, what you see here, was left untouched. But essentially, it was working. Trust me, I'm an engineer, it was working. But honestly, yes, it's very sad we cannot showcase it here. And I wouldn't blame my colleagues, but probably I broke.
Actually, if you do not reload it, right? If you do not reload it,
Okay.
it's still.
It should work like
For
this.
example, accessories was not visited, so image is not available.
Is the product?
It's partially responsible. So something happened. Something happened.
interesting in the philosophy because we have changed it. Yeah, interesting. Check before you go. Yeah, we'll fix it honestly.
Also, after the search, it completely broke down.
Yeah, that's true. Search was disabled as well. Yeah, it's limited demo. It's not yet ready to go.
Okay, so essentially this demo was not for showcasing the PWA. It was for showcasing the performance which can be achieved in Magento 2. Because even performance of this website is much better than any website you can possibly get on Magento at the moment. So yes, this is the only reason why this demo was created. So at the moment we have rewrote it with all the considerations in mind, and the presentation which you have seen today was based on the next version development.
We can try it once again. My network is off.
Have you launched in production?
No, it's not in production.
There is a store in production. It is in production.
It's going pro. It's going pro. The first version is going pro. Sure.
I would ask how much people use it, because it's not so obvious as a mobile app to store it. And
essentially, merchants who are Magento merchants like it.
We have a queue for this stuff.
Because for me it was very interesting, because you have made, I think, quite a lot of tweaks to get it work. And have you evaluated to use like some sort of native apps with a web view
because e-commerce shop development is very complex, and we will still like to stick with the Magento, our merchants are unable to actually pay for native app development plus the web application development. And because they sell a lot in the web, they like the feature to go native while coding only while paying only for web development.
Yeah, there is one more thing that is more valuable for company management, that actually not any web developer can work on native applications, and vice versa. So these are different technologies, so these are different teams. They must be managed probably differently, and it will raise the costs.
Did you face some issues with Android and iOS difference?
There were some.
Because I exactly know. So essentially, for iOS installation on the screen for the pop-up, we have to add a specific script. So the only difference was that for iOS we had to add a specific script, and we had to change add the behavior for going back. So essentially, when you install on iOS, if it's without the browser UI, it's PWA without browser UI, you need to implement or either the back button, either the swipe up like it's native for an iPhone. So this had to be done, and we done it basically.
Can you share what kind of script you were implemented to get it to work? As I understand, it will work as a pop-up in iOS.
I will share you after the conference. Sure, no problem. Yes. Any more questions?
How much time did it take for you from start from idea till release of the version 1?
So we had an estimate of 56 days, I believe. Was it 56?
No, actually, the first version was started as a part of the real life project, because about going live. We joined for a demo after 2 months, and we made a demo in maybe 3 weeks.
No, 2 weeks.
2 weeks. But the Serviceworker was done before by us, actually, by the demo team, and many more considerations and decisions were made by us. So right now we are working on version 2, and it took us 60 days.
No.
About 60 days of estimate to rework this to version 2.
But keep in mind, we had 20% estimate in this state for investigation and research, because we had to make a very good polished and optimized product out of the box. And today, I discovered that we are getting 98% performance in Lighthouse Audit without any optimizations on the version 2, just because we took the right decisions while just thinking about implementation.
And about investigation and decisions, there is important part to mention that we are building something basic for our colleagues. So it will be extended, it will be rewritten, and we spend a lot of time to invent, to create, to decide on how to do this. So for example, this is absolutely valid theme from Magento perspective, which is installed via Composer. If you are familiar with PHP, you know what is Composer. But it's absolutely React and Webpack there. But it's still managed with Composer, with some Webpack.
And that's
custom tweaks as
well. Thinking about developers was very crucial for us. So we followed all the patterns which Magento gives to developers. So even the file extension and our version is very similar to Magento. And we had to embed functionality and extend the Webpack itself to make it work with the additional code which our colleagues will later do on top of our core functionality. Questions anymore? Or
I think it's time for us to finish.